It is time to lay down another barrel of whiskey. So I've got a special experimental barrel from Badmo Barrels and a plan to run a slightly different bourbon recipe that I've been thinking about for some time. I hope, it's going to be unctuous, full-bodied, kind of sweet, and pair with this barrel real nice. How's it going, chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. I'm Jesse. This is Still It, and I have been thinking about, mentally playing with the idea of putting a decent amount of oats into a bourbon recipe. And I think it's going to be good, but I hadn't quite figured out the full concept. So when Christopher from Badmo Barrels sent me this barrel, thank you, Christopher, the concept all just kind of came together. The goal for this whiskey is to be kind of thick, velvety, unctuous, a little on the sweet side, with a decent amount of cherry finish. We're going to talk about how we're going to get that later on. I think what we should do right now, though, is just dive straight into making the wash. All right, team, let's get stuck into the mash. I have the claw hammer system here filled up with water that's heated up to 60, well, it's going to be 69 degrees Celsius, but it's at 68.5. Close enough. By the time we mashed in, we should be pretty close to hitting our mash temperature of about 64, 65 degrees Celsius. And I am going in with 10 kilos of corn, which shakes out to be about 56% corn, 3.5 kilos of barley, which is there for predominantly for the enzymes. And because obviously we're going for oats and wheat, I've got 2.5 kilos of wheat and 2 kilos of oats going in here as well. You may be thinking, don't you have to boil corn first to gelatinize the starch before it's converted? And yes, you would be 100% correct. You do, unless you're using malted corn. So this is malted corn. It is pre-gelatinized. It has almost no diastatic power. Doesn't have the enzymes to really even convert itself, let alone anything else. But it does mean it's already gelatinized, which means we don't have to do a boil, which saves a whole lot of trouble and a whole lot of goopy, sticky, corny mess. So that's all of the grain in there. It's just fitting in. Get my mash paddle out of here. Turn the recirc pump on. And away we go. All right, that has been 2.5 hours of mash time, partially because I had to go make food for the family, and partially because there's not a lot of barley in this, so a longer mash isn't going to be a bad thing. So what I need to do now is get this liquid out of here and into the fermenter. We can sparge it, and because I want to fill that barrel, we're going to do the whole thing all over again. I did exactly the same thing. The only difference was, purely on a whim, I decided to add 1.5 kilos of light chocolate malt in. I can't help myself. Sometimes I just need to throw some specialty malts into the mix. So with 2 mashes, both sparged, all of the liquid drained into the fermenter, I ended up with right around 100 liters of volume, maybe a little bit less, and 1.062 in gravity, which isn't bad. I'm happy with that. I'm confident that that will fill the Badmo barrel, but it won't leave me much to play with. So I made a split-second decision to throw in around about 2 kilos of sugar to bump me up to 1070 in total. And I am 100% confident that that'll fill the Badmo barrel plus give me, I don't know, somewhere between 1 liter, 2 liters of extra to play with in terms of aging it on glass. Time to talk yeast. Today, I'm going to be using AM1 from Angel Yeast, and yes, this video is actually sponsored by them. But honestly, I'd probably be using this anyway. I use this a bunch. I've grown to really trust this yeast and really, really appreciate the esters that it will throw. So much so that it is the primary yeast that we sell at chasercraft.com. Available in our New Zealand store and now in our American store as well. The reason I love it is that in terms of bang for buck, It is an amazing deal for home distillers. There are other M-style yeasts out there that are really hard to get hold of, and when you can get hold of them, they're not exactly cheap for us doing this at home. This stuff is amazing for that. And it stands up in terms of the flavors that it's going to impart into the final product as well. Traditionally, this sort of yeast is used more for single malts, kind of Scotch style products. But personally, I really love the smooth, approachable, fruity characteristics that it imparts into a whiskey. And for that reason, I tend to reach for it even when I'm making a corn style whiskey as well. The fermentation range for Angel AM1 yeast is 22 to 32 degrees Celsius, this in Fahrenheit. I tend to find the best results closer to the top end of that range. So today I'm going to be fermenting this at 30 degrees Celsius. So a huge thank you to Angel Yeast for sponsoring this video. If you'd like to find more information about this yeast and their whole range of yeasts, there'll be a link in the description down below. If you specifically want to pick it up from us, you can do so at chasethecraft.com. It took 5 days for this to ferment out almost dry. It finished at 1.005, which is kind of expected with an all-grain wash if you're not using bottled enzymes to completely dry it out. I let it sit for another 2 days at 30 degrees Celsius just to let any wild lacto or whatever else is in there start to take a little bit of a hold. I like to get a little bit more complexity and flavor due to that. Now it's time for the stripping run distillation. So I'm going to fill the still up, my large still, to around about 45 liters, put some butter in there as well to help prevent the puke. Fire it up to 100% power to get it warming up nice and quickly. When I know I'm starting to get close to temperature, I'm going to drop that down to about 50% power. For me, on that still, that's 2 kilowatts, just to be able to read the waters in terms of how foamy it's going to be in the pot. And I used a little sight glass on the front of the still. There's no plates in there, just to verify that we're not heading towards a puke. Once we're up and running, this is a stripping run, so I can put that power up as high as I can go, run the still nice and fast, and collect all the way down to around about 5% ABV coming off the still. Of course, that doesn't get us all the way through the wash because we had roughly 100 liters in the fermenter. So I'm just going to repeat that process again, and I'm going to reserve it's probably about 6 liters of usable wash, which is going to go back into the still along with all of the low wines. Now, because I distilled down to 5-ish% coming off the still, I ended up with 25 liters of low wine sitting right at 30% ABV. I'm going to put them back into the same still, going to distill them again in pot still mode, but this time we're going to run a little bit slower. A slower offtake speed, a little bit more cautious, a little bit more precise in terms of distillation. At the beginning of the run, I'm looking to find a transition from heads to hearts. I'm waiting for that weird potpourri, like fake cleaning product, estery kind of flavors to dissipate, for it to get clean. That's a trap. Don't switch then, because after that, you're going to get that weird rubber inner tube on a bike, like slightly sweet infant throw up kind of flavor coming through. When that cleans up, it's time to switch over to hearts. Once I'm 100% confident I'm in hearts, I tend to switch over to a large vessel to collect in just to save work, basically. I know I'm not going to be doing anything until I get down to at least like 65% coming off the still, and there's a bit of time before that happens. When I'm starting to get close, when I'm starting to get to the point where I think maybe tails are coming, I'll switch back to using rolling cuts and smaller vessels, so I don't accidentally let anything go into that pot and pollute the good stuff. Now, because this is going into a barrel and I plan to have it in that barrel for a long time, I decided to dip a little bit deeper into tails than maybe I would normally. And I ended up making the cut from hearts to tails right around 50% ABV. I was starting to get some really nice, intense chocolatey and grainy flavors down the bottom, but right on 50% ABV, it switched over to being just a little bit, rather than intensely fresh grain, it started turning into intensely old, like oxidized Weet-Bix or cornflakes that have sat in a semi-moldy container for years. kind of vibes. We don't like that. So we have all our hearts here. This is full to about here, just FYI. And it is currently sitting at right on 60% ABV, which is perfect. I'm happy to go into the barrel at that ABV, and it means we don't have to proof this down, like kind of dilute it down with water. All right, time to talk about the barrel. Like I said earlier on, I kind of teased you a little bit. This is a experimental barrel from Badmo Barrels. Why is it experimental? Well, American white oak, American white oak, American white oak. This stave here is cherry. Christopher has been testing these barrels and he is liking the results that are coming out of it. I've played around with cherry a little teeny tiny bit way back in the day, and I liked the results from those as well. He's calling them experimental because, as far as I know still, no one's got a barrel that's maybe more than 6 months old at this point in time. The results so far are promising, but we just don't quite know what's going to happen when you put spirit in here for a year, 2 years. And it does seem like the cherry wood brings out some cherry-like flavors that aren't overly cough syrupy. I don't like that flavor. I hate like cough syrup cherry in my bourbon. I love like the more actual taste like fruit, complex sherry flavors. But let's just get this in the barrel. Oh my word, go away, wasp. It can start getting some oaky and cherry-ish goodness straight away. And then I will taste the white spirit for you and let you know what I'm hoping this is going to turn into. All right, so the barrel is full to the tippy top. Let's put a bung in there. Give it a little love tap. You probably noticed that I was a little bit sloppy pouring into the barrel, and I have some liquid sitting on top. I'm actually going to add a teeny bit more. And my thinking here is, team, that I'd rather sacrifice a little bit more of the spirit and stand the barrel upright like this to let it swell, the wood against the stainless and the bung against the wood, to properly seal the barrel before I tip it horizontal. It needs to be horizontal so we have proper contact with the wood and the liquid, obviously. But these aren't natural products. They're not glued everywhere, and sometimes they do leak a little bit, normally for like an hour, a little tiny trickle. But if I can add a little bit more liquid in on top and have it swelling from the top down, it kind of just ensures that I'm way less likely to lose any of the liquid that's actually in the barrel. Tomorrow, I'll come out and flip that horizontal, put it to sleep for probably a good year or two. Anyway, I don't have a Glencairn. Let me find a Glencairn. We'll taste some of this, eh? All right, got myself a Glencairn. Chase the Craft Glencairns, available at chasethecraft.com if you're interested. But before we taste that, one last little thing to do is we actually have a little bit extra here, which I'm very happy about. Wanted a little bit more to play with and potentially to compare later on. So I'm going to tip this in here. I may need to move this to a smaller container later on, but this will do for now. Right now, I have one small piece of second use oak. It's actually third use oak now. The last time it was used was for the Irish pot still whiskey. So I'm going to take this off. I'm going to leave that in there. I am interested to see what happens with a little bit of that in there. But I can add more oak to this, or other kinds of wood. Have you say, let me know what you would like me to put in here. And over the next week or two, I'll add it in, get it all labeled up, and we can compare this in the future as well. So, what do we got? Very, very interesting nose. It is corny, but it is also quite grainy. The oats are coming through big time. So oats are one of those few things that when you distill them, they taste almost and smell very similar to just exactly them. Like they have an oatmeal porridge, depending on where you're from, kind of smell coming through. There is corn in there as well. I'm not really smelling any of the wheat. What I am smelling though is a little bit of that chocolate. It's a little bit more kind of grungy in terms of flavor. I think going a little bit lower into tails has kind of given us more of that chocolate flavor, but also it leans on the side of grunge. We're also getting a bunch of fruity characteristics, and I have to imagine that most of that is coming from the AM1 yeast. That's why I love the stuff. That's why even when it's a bourbon, I tend to err on the side of going with a M1 style yeast. Of course, you know, that's up to you. Okay, so right off the bat, this is a white whiskey that's been cut wide. It's really not ready to be drunk now. So everything I say from here on in, I'm taking that into account. Heaps of body, heaps of that velvety, silky mouthfeel that I've come to associate with oats. And in my experience, as it ages and as the wood starts to do its thing, that is going to dial up even more. It'll become more noticeable that we put oats in there over time than it is now. The corn flavor's there, which is nice. We don't want to miss out on that. And I'm hoping that the cherry is going to kind of augment that. And if for no other reason that my brain tends to associate, if I'm going to associate the cherry flavor with anything, it's with corn. So I'm hoping that mentally that'll dial that up a little bit more as well. That oat flavor is definitely there, and now it is tapered and mellowed off even more with the wheat. It's not that I can taste the wheat specifically, it's that I can tell that the wheat is altering the oat flavor. I hope that makes sense. There's still heaps of fruit characteristic on the taste as well. And in my experience, the AM1 fruity estery characteristics do stick around in the barrel, so I'm hopeful for that. And there's a really nice chocolate finish. The chocolate is more palatable already to taste than it is to smell. So all in all, I have really high hopes for this. I think that this is going to be probably one of the better bourbons I've made in 2 years. I mean, we're looking into a crystal ball here, guys. But in my experience, starting with this and then using really high quality oak, it's going to be good. I just don't know exactly what it's going to be. So would I recommend you trying this? 100% yes, I would recommend you try it. If you're interested in the experimental barrels, you can check chasethecraft.com. We don't have any of the cherry ones right now, but we may get some back in the future. And just so you understand, we only sell these to Australia and New Zealand. If you're in America or the rest of the world, there'll be a link down there to the Bad Motivator website, and that is an affiliate link for us. We get a tiny little small kickback for sending you their way, and honestly, it just makes me happy that someone like Christopher making a product like this can continue to sell it. So I'd appreciate if you support him as well. Anyway, that's it, team. We can check in on this in the future. I will catch you next week for, honestly, I don't know what we're doing next week. I'll see you then. Bye.